Hey, Pags here at MEI Studio. This time we're going to be looking at perhaps one of the most recognized names in microphones. We're looking at the Neumann MCM114, this time on the mic locker. Welcome to the Mic Locker. If this is your first time checking out the channel, I thank you and invite you to stick around for some history and some practical studio demos of our subject today, the Neumann MCM114. As we do, let's take a dive into the long history of Neumann microphones. Almost anyone involved in audio knows the name Neumann for microphones, but there's a lot more to Georg Neumann than many realize. The story started 2 centuries ago in 1898 in Koren, Germany. Georg Neumann was born into a railroad worker's family. Not formally schooled, but curious about technology, Georg apprenticed at Mix and Gnest in Berlin, which was a telephone and telegraph low-voltage device company. He then moved to work in the research department of AEG, where he would work on new audio amplifiers. It was here that he worked under a man named Eugene Rice, who he later partnered up with and continued to work for after World War I. At Rice's company, he worked to develop an optomechanical method of putting sound to film for motion pictures. The device used a small light device that exposed a section of the film which would harden the film material. A pressure transducer then used the varying hardness of the exposed part of the film to play the audio back. Since the microphones of the time were kind of crude, to put it nicely, Rice and Neumann worked on a new type of carbon microphone that stored carbon granules, a special type of coal, inside a marble block. At first, they put a somewhat rigid diaphragm over the device to help transduce the sound into an electrical current. The material they used, however, left the mic sounding very mid-heavy with no real top or bottom end. Neumann experimented by putting a rubber sheet over the opening where the carbon was kept, and the microphone came alive. The bottom end and much more top end emerged from the mic, and history was made. The Rice mic, as it became known, was quickly adopted for its superior sound and were being sold to many of the broadcast facilities of the day in Europe. Georg, however, still wasn't 100% happy with the results. He felt that it could be even better. He started looking into an idea that E.C. Wendt developed for a capacitive transducer type, which Rice didn't quite agree with. During his time with Rice, Georg developed capacitive speakers, magnetic pickups, and mechanical cutting heads for records. Since Rice and Neumann didn't quite see eye to eye on some points of further developing new technologies, Georg decided it was best for him to move on from Rice's company and venture out with Erich Rickman to form Georg Neumann and Company in Berlin in 1928. It's here that the first Neumann microphone was developed, the CMV3, or the Neumann bottle. The microphone was huge. It measured in at 9 centimeters in diameter, around 40 centimeters high, and weighed in over 6.5 pounds or around 3 kilograms. The marketing for the mics was given to a subsidiary of AEG and Siemens at the time, a company called Telefunken. In the 30s, Neumann had the need for some test equipment and developed the linear motion logarithmic pen recorder, which became the standard laboratory method for level recording. I'm sure you've seen something similar. It's like the little pens that kind of scratch the wavy lines on the paper as it rolls by. That was Neumann. His mics were widely used for the 1936 Olympic Games and were a favorite of the country's then leader. This was quite the sticking point for Georg, as his wife and many of the people that worked in his factory were of Jewish descent. It's been said that he was thought of so highly from the Führer, Neumann's wife and many of his employees were spared the terrible fate that so many others faced at the time. When the Second World War erupted in Europe, Neumann's factory was not as lucky. The facility was firebombed by the Allies in 1943. Georg, his family, and much of his staff that were left relocated east to Gefell, where they took over an old textile factory and production continued. Capsules such as the M7 were developed by Walter Weber and Hans Joachim von Brunmühl of the Reichsrundfunkgesellschaft. Yeah, we have the propaganda arm of the Reich to thank for the M7 capsule in the U-47. By 1947, Neumann had developed a new microphone design, a very simple design based around the common VF14 tube, the U47, which became commercially available the following year. In 1948, Neumann and family moved back to Berlin and started the company Georg Neumann GmbH. Just so you know, that GmbH is essentially a limited partnership type of business, kind of like when companies here in the US put LLC or Corp after their name. That's all that really means. The facility in Gefell kept running until 1961, when the Berlin Wall was erected and companies there were taken over by the communist state. While under control of the state, the factory continued to produce microphones under the Microtech Gefell name, but were Neumann design products. An interview in Sound on Sound in 2004 stated that Gefell continued to make the M7 capsule in the same manner that Georg Neumann had shown Erich Kuhnhast, who was his technical director in the 40s. After the reunification, the company, which had been taken over by the state, was relinquished to the Neumann family and is currently owned by descendants of the Kuhnhast and Dreschler family. But that's another story for another mic. Around the same time that the U47 was being developed, along with the K47 and K49 capsules, George was looking into a way to stabilize heater voltages for his condenser microphones. He at this point had moved to Paris, and working off of a concept discovered in 1899, Neumann was able to develop a method of sealing a battery, making it gas tight, which was made of nickel and cadmium elements and was rechargeable. We now know this technology as the NiCad battery. That's right, Neumann created the NiCad battery. Having no interest in producing the Stabilite batteries outside of his purpose for heating the AC701 tube that was used in many of the microphones at the time, the patent was sold to the Deutsche Edison company, and we all now have battery power for all sorts of devices, from hearing aids to camera flashes, portable radios, just about anything else that needs power on the go. In the years to come, Neumann developed other industry-changing devices. The Neumann cutting lathes were considered one of, if not the best ever produced, and were produced all the way to the advent of the compact disc. The company much later also developed a lathe that was used to cut discs for the early TED video disc system. The refinement in developing that technology furthered the advancements of his audio lathes as well. 1949 saw the patent and release of the M49 microphone, which was the first electrically variable polar pattern condenser microphone. By adjusting voltages that went to both sides of the capsule, they were able to achieve cardioid, hypercardioid, figure eight, and omnidirectional pickup patterns, amongst others, using the same capsule. Throughout the 50s, use of Neumann microphones led to the shaping of modern music and television. While many American acts in the 40s, like Bing Crosby, were using RCA ribbon mics to achieve a big rounded sound, the 50s acts like Frank Sinatra and later the Beatles in the 60s had a sharp, clear, high-fidelity sound that was like nothing that had come before it. Television looked for smaller and clearer microphones like the Neumann KM series to make on-set recording easier and less noticeable on camera where applicable. Mics like the KM53, 54, 55, and 56 all utilized new method of capsule developed that was an offshoot of George's work with nickel for his batteries. Smaller capsules were made that still captured a full broad spectrum of sound, but instead of the gold on the diaphragm, he was using nickel. 1960 saw the release of the U67 large diaphragm tube condenser mic, which set the trend for what many other condenser microphones would strive to look like in the coming years. The U67 and U47 eventually had their tubes replaced by the new FET technology that was out, and the U47 FET was born, and with some other changes, the U67 was kind of morphed into the U87. Neumann was the first to utilize 48 volts for phantom power, helping to push that as a standard. While Schoeps was the first to use phantom power for a mic, they weren't quite yet using it at 48 volt level. So Neumann was the first to 48, but Schoeps was the first to use phantom power. Technical, I know. The company also started to develop recording consoles using the latest technologies available. In 1973, the KU81 dummy head binaural mic was introduced, which allowed for a more realistic stereo image. The 80s brought about the Transformerless or TLM microphone series. If I went on about every mic that Neumann ever produced, this video would be longer than our kick mic video, and honestly, no one wants that, especially me. Georg Neumann would pass away in 1976, leaving behind 2 children and a legacy that may never be matched in the world of professional audio. Unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to see his homeland reunified, but his name lives on in the company that we all know today. In 1991, the company was sold to another German family-owned company that was producing microphones, Sennheiser. The manufacturing was moved to a new addition to the Sennheiser complex known as the Neumann Production Hall. State-of-the-art equipment was brought in to preserve the meticulous heritage that the Neumann name has come to be known for. Another thing that the company has come to be known for is the price of their microphones, which are typically some of the highest prices in the industry. And why is that? Well, in short, and this is going to sound weird, measurement. Yes. The components that go into Neumann microphones can sometimes be measured to the 10,000ths of a millimeter. That's some tight tolerances there. Their microphones are also subjected to some 50-odd ridiculous tests that far exceed anything that the mic may see under normal operation. They're subjected to temperature and humidity extremes to ensure that the mics still operate under the most harsh environments. The mics will be dripping wet from heat and humidity and then frozen with frost forming, and they still need to operate as expected. With the standards set so high, the tolerances are so low, every mic needs to meet these criteria of extreme measurements to be released, which is why these microphones are as expensive as they are. If the microphone doesn't meet the tolerance, it doesn't get released. And these tolerances are part of the reason that Neumann never released an electret microphone. In fact, it wasn't until 2022 when Neumann released the MCM114. For the first time, developers at Neumann felt that their work in developing an electret microphone finally yielded a production that met their high standards. Apparently, the microphone was in development for around 6 years before they brought it to market. While the first Neumann mic was huge by any standard, their latest release couldn't be on the more opposite end of the size spectrum. With the titanium housing and impossibly small electronics embedded in the capsule itself, the MCM114 is the smallest Neumann microphone ever released. Intended for spot close miking a number of different instruments, the mic is sold alone or in pairs with a myriad of different clip accessories to accommodate the situation. We got a pair of these mics as an alternative to our Roswell mics for piano sessions where we need to keep the lid of the piano closed for separation purposes and still be able to capture the full sound of the instrument. We also picked up some clips to attach to the acoustic bass and guitar. Clips for horns and other string instruments and percussion are available as well. In addition, these mics can be paired with Sennheiser wireless body packs, for when you want to have a really expensive mic that's the size of a pencil eraser on stage. The mic specs are about as extreme as its size. With a max SPL of a whopping 153 dB and a self-noise of 23 dB A-weighted, this mic can handle the quietest and loudest of sources with ease. The mic is somewhat permanently attached to a gooseneck, which is a proprietary cable connection, and it's all held together with this odd plastic assembly. The other end of the cable is a standard TRS 1/8-inch connector, which can plug directly into the wireless pack or into the available Neumann MCM100 phantom-powered XLR output stage. With the MCM100 attached, the output impedance is 50 ohms. The mic exhibits a cardioid pickup pattern and has a frequency response of 20 Hz to 20 kHz. And I'm going to say it now, the actual response is actually well beyond those specs, as we'll see in the demo. Depending on the clip that you want to get, the mic with the gooseneck and the MCM100 will set you back around 700 USD, which is not crazy for a Neumann microphone. We're going to take these little guys into the studio and pop them in the piano, on the acoustic bass and guitar, and try it out on snare and toms. So let's get to it. I have to say that I'm very impressed by their performance for their size. While I do find the boominess with the bass and guitar a little bit much, it's nothing a filter can't take care of easily. It would have been nice to have an HPF on the little MCM though. I am surprised that the mic will produce sounds below 20 Hz. To me, that's just crazy. Barring that, the tone of the mics are well balanced and seem to work really well for their intended purposes. While I'm not a huge fan of the price tag, the build quality certainly justifies the price of admission. Interestingly enough, DPA put out a very similar mic package, and the clips that are available for the DPA mics, which are a little bit cheaper, seem to work with the Neumanns, even though they are a little looser than the Neumann clips I have, which are a little more rigid. What did you think of these mics? Are there any string or horn players out there that have used these mics out in the wild? Anything that you can think of these mics might be good on? Might these fit some situation you're having in your studio like we had? Let me know. Leave a message down below. Let's chat about it. As always, if you've gotten anything from today's video, please hit the like and subscribe button. If you're interested in studio mics and other things audio related, hit that notify button so you'll be notified when we put up a new video. If you have any suggestions for a video or questions regarding this one or anything else, again, please use the comments section or send us a message through our website. We'd love to hear from you. Well, that's it for this time. This is Pags, signing off.